Hey everyone, I'm Caleb. I am the student director at Flatirons Longmont. Thank you so much for jumping in on this video with us today. We're wrapping up our series called Numbered and Named. If you want to get the most out of this video, there are 3 things you can do. 1, watch it with a leader. 2, share it with one of your friends. And 3, if you're watching on Instagram or YouTube, just leave a message in the comments if you have any questions or whatever. We would love to connect with you on there. Thanks again for watching this with us and hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, so we are in our final week of our Numbered and Named series, and we're talking about purpose and where we belong. And if you tuned in last week, Lindsay and Joseph talked about the disciples. They also related it to Harry Potter. And if you have watched Harry Potter, in the last bit, Deathly Hallows, you see that they are really great when they're together, but they do split. And it's really hard on them, you know? Like, Ron can't get out of bed, and they're all split up. No one knows where Hermione is. No one's even heard from her. She's MIA, but they're not doing great anymore. Things are really tough. They're still trying to accomplish like the first thing they set out to do, but it's just not the same. And eventually they do come back together, and they again do more heroic things. And also with the disciples, you heard Lindsay and Joseph talk about how the disciples were a family. They did everything together, and we're not supposed to go through this life alone. We don't have to go through this life alone either. But I'm willing to bet that the disciples probably felt pretty lost when Jesus died, wouldn't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's going on? Like, so much confusion. This guy who gave them so much purpose and meaning and guidance and direction, he's gone now. And I bet that was probably a pretty confusing time when they're trying to figure out, was he the real deal or not?
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we get in this like way of thinking where we let what we belong to determine what our purpose is. And so like if you're, on the football team, your purpose is to score touchdowns and win games. Or if you're in the marching band, your purpose is to like make sure you hit all the notes of the final countdown like right on. And then, if you're in the chess club, your goal is to like win the chess match. And back in March, we all probably could have sat in a cafeteria like this and pointed to, these different areas and said like, oh, the people who sat at this table, this is what they did. And this was like what the purpose that they had to try to like do that. But now all those old things that used to give us purpose really aren't there anymore.
Right. They don't exist right now. And like obviously sports and extra activities, they're canceled for the time being, or skate parks are closed, playgrounds are closed, like you can't even go play groundies with your friends. Do they still play groundies?
I hope so.
Do you remember Red Rover?
I do. We used to get like, kids would have to go to the doctor after that because they'd break an arm.
But what we're saying is you can't do stuff right now like that. Playgrounds are literally marked off. You can't even get together with a group of friends that you belong to, and it might seem like your purpose is as empty as this cafeteria is right now. And I know for me, when I was in high school, I got into some trouble, but my senior year, I started going to this youth group and I got really, really involved in it, and I became a student leader, which is similar to like our student captains. Mm-hmm. And so they were held to a different standard, and so it really helped me stay out of trouble, and it gave me a lot of purpose in that. But then I graduated, and I wasn't allowed to go to that group anymore. They didn't even have a leadership opportunity available for someone my age at the time, and I just really felt like that was taken away from me. And I was really angry about it. I felt really empty, really lost, and I forgot all about like the things about Jesus that I heard. And so it led me to kind of walk away from my life with Jesus. And back to the disciples, I'm sure they started to question if Jesus was the real deal, like he died. What's next? They were in this limbo of not really understanding maybe what's going on, but they remembered things that Jesus said, like we see in John 10:14, I am the good shepherd, I know my own, and my own know me. That's really comforting because you don't know like who you are until you know whose you are.
So right after that verse that we talked about happens in John 10, in John 11, we hear this story about this guy named Lazarus. And we don't know a whole lot about Lazarus, but we know 2 things about him. 1, we know that he's friends with Jesus, and 2, we know that he has 2 sisters. I don't know what their birth order is, but I'm a middle child with this older sister and a younger sister. So that's what I like to think is the same for like Lazarus too. But anyway, so we know that Lazarus is trying to like figure out how he can be a good friend. So his purpose is to do things like eat lunch with Jesus and talk with Jesus and talk about hard things that are going on in his life with Jesus and doing all those things that friends do that you and I would do. And then as a sibling, Lazarus, like gets picked on by his older sister, and his younger sister tattles on him, but then they like spend time together and they have all these really fun family moments together, and his purpose is being a friend and a sibling. But one day, Lazarus gets really sick. And I don't know necessarily like what he got sick with or how it happened, but what ends up happening is Lazarus dies. And I think as it led up to him dying, he probably like withdrew a little bit from what his purposes were and started to isolate himself, maybe from his sisters and also from Jesus. But eventually Lazarus dies and he gets buried, and they put kind of a stone in front of his grave like they do when Jesus dies. And so Jesus comes and he visits Lazarus, and he asks him if he can like move the stone away or whatever. And they think that, yeah, he probably just wants to like see his friend. And so Jesus is sitting in there and he's looking at Lazarus lying there in the grave, kind of wrapped up in toilet paper. And he's thinking like, I don't know what Jesus is thinking, but what Jesus does is really important. He looks at Lazarus and he says his name. He says, "Lazarus, come out." And all of a sudden, Lazarus sits up and he's brought back to life. And then he stands up and he walks out of that empty tomb. And I think for Lazarus, one of the things that happened that day is, like, eventually someday he would die again, but everything that happened from that time he walked out of that tomb to the time when his sisters would bring him back into that tomb later on in his life, everything he did, he looked back and he could say, I got to do that because Jesus gave me purpose on this specific day. So we belong to Jesus, and his purpose is for us to get to know God even when things feel empty. So Nicole, when things felt really empty for you, like in your story, what ended up happening with that?
Yeah, so I had ventured away from Jesus for a few years, and then some friends invited me to church randomly one time. So I started going back, and then one day I just felt the conviction of what I'm doing is really empty. And I decided, okay, then I want Jesus in my life because I don't want to feel empty anymore. I want to feel like I have purpose. And so I regave my life to him, if you will. And I started following him again, and I had to leave some things behind in order to do that. But I came back to him, and now I feel the purpose I have of belonging to Jesus.
That's really good. And I think sometimes when these big interruptions happen in our lives, one of the best things that we can do is to go back to figuring out, like, what are the things I need to do to make sure that I know that I belong to Jesus. And that can be really helpful for us as we're like sitting down in our homes trying to figure out what we should do next.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you? What are some things you're doing during quarantine that's maybe bringing you back to the foundation of belonging to Jesus?
Yeah, one of the things that I like to do when there's anything that kind of messes up my rhythm is I like to read this book of the Bible called the Psalms. And what the Psalms are is they're basically like this book that are a bunch of people's written prayers to God. And what I like about it is it's not like people who are just sitting there going like, oh God, you're so holy, thank you for, blessing me. But it's people who are talking about God, about the real crap that's going on in their lives. And they're saying like, God, like my bed is wet with tears because of how I feel like you've abandoned me. And it's all this stuff that I know that I feel, but sometimes I don't feel like I can say it out loud. And I think the Psalms are a good like reminder to see like what kind of conversations you can have with God.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's ever going to be something like COVID-19 that happens again that kind of displaces us from everything we've had in our lives. To be honest, like there probably won't be. But what I do know is that like there will be other things in your life that try to give you your purpose. So like there will always be like a sports team, or there will be some sports teams that you can be on. They'll try to give you your purpose. Even when high school and middle school are over, you'll go to college, and those things will try to give you your purpose. Or when you're older, you'll have a job or a family, and you'll always be trying to pull your purpose from other things. But what we do know is that like something will happen, like you'll blow out a knee, someone will get a bad diagnosis from a doctor, you'll fail a class, you'll get kicked out of school, something will happen that'll make you feel empty. And what we want you to do is to realize that if you let yourself belong to Jesus, that's the one thing that you can always belong to, that'll always give you a purpose, and it won't be able to be taken away from you.
So bottom line, a life with Jesus is a life of purpose. And maybe right now you're feeling empty or you don't have purpose because a lot of things have been taken away from us or feel like they've been taken away from us. So something that Caleb and I really want to challenge you with is during this quarantine, what does it look like for you to belong to Jesus? Or what is something you can do to make Jesus the foundation of what you belong to? And maybe that's reading your Bible. Or maybe it's praying or calling a leader. Or maybe it's putting your phone away for a day and not getting on TikTok or Instagram or getting away from that for a little bit. But remember, a life with Jesus is a life with purpose. Hey, I'm Nicole. I am the Student Ministry Director for the Aurora campus. Thanks so much for tuning in with us today. And I wanted to let you guys know that 3 p.m. every Wednesday, we're going live on Instagram to talk about the previous week's message or answer any questions you might have or just talk about things that you want to talk about. So we'd love it if you joined us for that. Again, thank you so much for tuning in today, and we miss you so much.